Murphy was a devout Catholic. She went to church every day. She was active in her parish for many, many years. So when Mrs. Murphy passed away, she left her money to the temple down the street, the Jewish temple. So the priest was beside himself. He was aghast. Why would this woman, who was so devout, so Catholic, so involved, why would she leave her money to the temple down the street? It didn't make any sense. So finally, he took it upon himself to go down to the temple and ask the rabbi why this happened. Asked the rabbi, she's so devout, she comes to church every day, why did she leave the money to you? And the rabbi said, because I asked. And that's why we're here today. We are here to ask our representatives to support us in the important work that we do. We've been referred to as charities, as do-gooders, but we're so much more than that. The reality is that nonprofits touch us all every day in many different ways. We're schools, we're hospitals, we're community health centers, we're financial institutions, we're housing, we're public arts. We are a sector there are 33,000 nonprofits here in Massachusetts alone. 1 in 6 residents are employed by a nonprofit. That's enormous. We have income in excess of $2.3 billion and assets in excess of $2.7 billion. So we're definitely much more than do-gooders and charities. We are an economic engine and many oftentimes a catalyst for change. As an example, my organization, the Coalition for a Better Acre, invested $43 million in real estate development in the Upper Merrimack Street corridor, along with House of Hope in their investments. We revitalized the neighborhood and changed the face of it. I believe that UMass Lowell's latest project, University Crossing, would not have happened without the work of the nonprofits who invested in that neighborhood first. Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership, their graduates will buy every year somewhere between $35 and $50 million in real estate. That's annually. The latest catalyst for change here in Lowell has been Mill City Grows. They go into dense urban neighborhoods and create gardens, green space, community, and allow immigrants and low-income residents to grow culturally appropriate food and decrease the cost of their budgets.
The health center has over 350 staff, and over half of our staff are bilingual, bicultural. We have 35 doctors and nurse practitioners and 30 behavioral health providers. So our annual impact on the local economy is over $35 million a year. This particular building, which opened in December of 2012, so we've been open a little more than a year, represents a $42 million investment in the city. In addition to this building, we have 2 school-based health centers, and we're very proud of our Meta Health Center just across the canal, which opened in 2000 to better serve the Southeast Asian community in Lowell. In the 1 year of 2013, the health center saw 5,000 new patients coming to the health center who had not come here before.
Almost half of the people in need across the Commonwealth don't qualify for government benefits. They rely on the network of over 800 food pantries and other emergency food providers across the state to fill these gaps. To our legislators, by voting for an increase in the line item for MEFAP, you'll be giving our neighbors in your district and throughout the Commonwealth in all 351 cities and towns nutritious food so that they can work, if they're fortunate enough to work, look for work, so their children can learn, grow, and develop, so our seniors can take medication with food if needed. You'll be helping us access food, and that's what we're asking you to consider for an increase for fiscal year 15. The 4 food banks in Massachusetts are feeding as many as 801,200 people annually through our partner agencies. In Middlesex and Essex County, 129,000 people are accessing this state food.
The price of home heating oil has gone up. In 2003 and 2004, it was $1.45 a gallon. This winter, it's $3.94 a gallon. In fiscal year 10, we received in this area a little over $9 million in funding for fuel. This year, it's about $6 million. So we would certainly love to get more funding from both the federal and state government. But I think what's most important to us in terms of the state's partnership in this effort is to provide that money early on so that we can have the staff on board, process the applications, have fewer people in emergency situations in the early fall. And then if we get additional funding later in the year, either from the federal government, as also occurred this year, or from the state, we have the infrastructure in place so that we can quickly and smoothly process those applications and not have those emergency phone calls coming in on Friday afternoons and trying to decide what we can do to make sure that someone stays warm and safe in their homes this weekend. So if you would consider that in this year's House 1 budget, we'd be very appreciative. Thank you.
My name is Frank Baskin, and I represent the Greater Lowell Elder Mental Health Collaborative. We are a collaborative organization which supports and advocates for the appropriate, accessible, and affordable mental health services for elders. We're also part of a statewide coalition, the Massachusetts Aging and Mental Health Coalition. And to that effect, we are supporting a line item in the state budget which is dedicated to geriatric mental health. Now, that's a good thing that there's such a line item in the state budget. The problem is there's no money in the line item, and hasn't been any money in that line item for a number of years. And so we know that when elders don't receive appropriate and accessible mental health services, they are much more likely to be placed in a nursing home and to never leave, to live in that nursing home for the rest of their days. We know when elders do receive appropriate and accessible mental health services, they're far less likely to ever get into a hospital or a nursing home, and they're going to stay in the community with their families, contributing as volunteers, or even working. Now, we're asking for $350,000 in our $36 billion state budget. Seems to me that's a really good deal. $350,000 instead of paying millions and millions of dollars for nursing home care.
Funding, and I'm going to actually just spend 2 seconds, more like 2 minutes, talking about residential funding. So Lifelinks is going to celebrate our 60th year of providing services to adults with disabilities in the Greater Lowell area this year. That's a very heady kind of thought to think that we've been doing this work for 60 years. For almost 30 of those years, we've been doing that work with the same level of funding. We have been funded at the same level essentially since 1988. In that time period, from 1988 until today, the Consumer Price Index has increased 102%. Our contracts with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have increased 0%. So how do we do it? Smoke and mirrors, moving people around, getting incredibly creative, running a deficit. And we have run a deficit in our residential programs for years. But why do we do that? Why don't we just close our doors and close up shop and say, you know what, we can't do this anymore? For all the reasons why everybody sitting in this room does what you do. Because you have a passion, you have a love, and there's an incredible unmet need in the community. And were we to shut our doors, what would happen to the 62 people who are dependent on us for long-term residential services and supports? Our oldest resident, I believe, is 74 years of age. He doesn't have a family to go to. If we closed our doors and said, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore because it's just too costly, where would he go? Probably, as Frank said, to one of those nursing homes at an exorbitant cost. So the pressures of making a decision about what is fiscally responsible versus what is morally right or ethically sound are really hard decisions to make. We appreciate everything that you have done over the years to support services for adults with disabilities, and know that we have a true passion at Lifelinks to do the work that we do, and we anticipate that we will be doing this work for another 60 years. Thank you.
Before I start talking about numbers or FY15 budget, I do just want to ask that if there's 3 things that folks and legislators you take out of what I'm going to talk about today, it's that 1, collaborative work across all levels in the community, from law enforcement to the providers around youth violence prevention. They're critical to our success in dealing with this issue. The second thing I ask folks to take away is that the 3 funding sources I'm going to talk about today are not interchangeable, that they're interdependent, and they serve a variety of different risk levels for young people, according to the Department of Public Health. The third thing that I hope folks take away is that continuing to address youth violence in Lowell should not just be seen as prevention, intervention, or recovery efforts anymore. It's now really important that we start talking about youth violence prevention as a wise economic investment for the city as well. there are 3 different risk factors from the Department of Public Health. Going from right to left, it's at-risk young people, then we have high-risk young people, and then we have proven risk young people. Now, in short, we're identifying risk as being behaviors that youth exhibit ranging from dropped out of high school, criminal involvement like getting arrested, gang involvement, homelessness, and the list goes on. The first funding source that falls under at-risk youth is our youth violence prevention funding. This currently funds at-risk youth programs in the Youth Violence Prevention Coalition, of which Lowell Community Health Center, Boys and Girls Club, YWCA, and UTEC are involved in. Last year, this helped us serve 675 youth through Lowell Community Health Center's Teen Block program, through the Youth Council, and also through UTEC's Youth-Led Candidate Forum. Currently, FY14, the city gets $80,000 for this. At its height in FY9, the city was getting more than double that at $200,000. If we were to be able to be restored to that level, the collaborative work across that coalition would be able to be more than doubled, and the impact could be felt citywide. I would like to recognize LCHC for their lead on this grant in the past, and thank Linda in particular for your leadership on that. Next, we have the Shannon Anti-Gang Grant, which I'm going to start off by really, truly thanking, with appropriate eye contact, the legislators who were true leaders on this. Seriously, true leaders on this. These guys fought really hard to get an additional funding mid-year for the Shannon Grant, which came to Lowell to the sum of $569,000. This is a really critical program that funds local law enforcement and community partners to do mental health work, community outreach, education, and other prevention work directly related to gang violence. It was funded at $17.2 million. Thanks to our delegation's leadership, it got raised to $18 million, and we're asking for that again in the FY15 budget. Lastly, we have the Safe and Successful Youth Initiative, or SSYI. This is relatively new funding source. It was a governor's initiative a few years ago, and this was created to fill a gap in youth violence prevention funding. This funding targets a specific list of, in 11 communities, 100 or so of the most proven risk young men ages 16 to 24. The state defined this. I'm not a huge fan of the definition, but the state defined these young men as being most likely to kill or be killed. We say the top 100 young men 16 to 24 most likely to be involved in violent crimes. To date, the state legislature has passed in the annual budgets at $4 million, but we've learned every year the price tag falls around $9.5 million. Every year to date, the governor's had to push out a supplemental budget. I would like to also recognize our delegation for just this week passing both in the House on Wednesday and in the Senate on Thursday a supplemental budget that would give an additional $4.8 to SSYI, but we ask going forward in FY15 that budget out the gate could be around $9.5 million. In short, for SSYI, I just want to reference a meeting yesterday we had, and Carrie Dates is in the room, and Carrie is the coordinator for SSYI citywide, that we had an official from Commonwealth Corps who oversees the administrative side of SSYI, and he pulled me aside. He said, Jeff, I got to tell you, being in this room and seeing the collaboration from folks all the way in local law enforcement to all the providers across the city, this is the exact goal that SSYI had in mind. And he said, no other city's doing the level of work that Lowell's doing regarding the collaborative work across all levels. And you can see on the fact sheet, there's a long list of different providers and folks that benefit from the funding, and they're able to provide services. Unfortunately, UTEC's Executive Director, Greg Coteau, couldn't be here today, but I did want to quote an op-ed he wrote in the Lowell Sun about youth violence prevention funding. He says that when the Commonwealth maintains its commitment to addressing youth violence, the benefits go far beyond public safety. We spend $46,000 per person for incarceration annually. And there's more costs on top of that, like healthcare coverage upon release. Yet high-performing youth organizations, like many of us in this room, we're able to serve a young person for less than a third of that, for $10,000 to $15,000 a year. We can no longer regard this work as purely prevention or intervention, but also a wise economic investment for the city. Again, we're asking legislators to please support continuing to fund youth violence prevention efforts in Lowell. From 2012 to 2013, the city of Lowell saw a 44% decrease in gang violent related crimes. That's major for the city, and we should be really proud of that. The collaborating agencies, really long. Again, reference your list. There's many folks here in this room and out in the community that couldn't be here today because they're busy doing the work that really do benefit from this programming. we ask for youth violence prevention funding to be restored to $200,000 for the city, that the Shannon grant be continued at its $8 million mark, and that SSYI in the House budget coming up, and again in the Senate budget, could be funded out the gate for $9.5 million to prevent the need for a supplemental budget next year. Thank you.
Childcare is everywhere. Why is childcare everywhere? Because it's a business that has a lot of customers. Communities across this country, communities like Lowell, run on this invisible infrastructure that is childcare. Investing in childcare has 3 important, huge impacts. The first one, people who work in childcare have jobs. The second one, people who depend on childcare can go to work, or people who need childcare and get childcare can find work and keep work. And the most important part of childcare is the child. Children who have access to a quality education experience are more successful in school and in life, period. That's the shortest way I could possibly explain it. And thank you as well to the legislators for the work that you do in your service to the whole to the city of Lowell, our community, and the parents that depend on the services that we have. But I'd like to ask you one last question, and that is if you will prioritize increased investments in high-quality early education and care for the fiscal year budget of 2015. With your help, we will not only continue to thrive and make a difference in the lives of parents and families now, but we will be able to power, through this wonderful infrastructure, the leaders of tomorrow.
Because 18 years ago, when I was a freshman representative, I understood the importance of not-for-profit organizations. If we didn't have not-for-profit organizations in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, imagine what a negative impact that would be on our society, because we don't have enough money to pay for all of the great things that you do in our community and make it better. So our budget, remember, House 1 probably isn't going to be what the final budget is. In my 18 years, it never has been the final. We will be starting our budget process. Well, we've already started our budget process. We're already meeting with Chairman of Ways and Means and the Ways and Means Committee, so it's not too early for you people to ask. And when the budget comes out, you must continue to ask us to do more with the budget and how we can help you out with the budget. You know, there's nothing wrong with asking. Tip O'Neill had the best story. When the first campaign he was ever in, he lost by 1 vote. And he figured it out that it was his next door neighbor, not Mrs. Murphy, but Mrs. Carmody. And he went to her and he said, Mrs. Carmody, I shovel your walk every snowstorm. I carry your groceries in all the time, and you didn't vote for me. Why didn't you vote for me? She looked at him and said, Tip, you never asked me. So if you don't ask, you're not going to get attention paid to you. So remember, continue to ask, and please contact us down at the State House when our budget comes out and how we can help out in the budget process.
At this time of year, the legislators are very busy. Representative Golden, Murphy, and Nangle and myself hear from a lot of people because it's budget time. And so they come to our doors and raise their priorities with us, which is really important that we hear from you. One of the things that we talk a lot about, of course, and I think it's one of the most important things we do, is handle the budget for the state. And though it's $35+ billion, much of that is already spoken for. So the dollars that are not spoken for, as you can imagine, are hotly contested. And so it's so important that we hear from our constituents as to what your priorities are. And today has been, again, a wonderful opportunity to hear from the Nonprofit Alliance here in the city of Lowell, so that we can see and hear once again the good work that you're doing, whether it's from the very, very young, the youth in our community, through elderly and the services that are necessary for our elderly. And this is something, you know, we oftentimes in the legislature like to think in terms of where we're going and big dreams and how do we improve the Commonwealth. But what you do every day is really the most important. You're taking care of the people in our society that need our help the most. You do it day in and day out. The dollars that you ask from the legislature are small in comparison to the good that you bring to our community. And so I can tell you that you have our support. You've had our support year in and year out when it comes to those tough budget fights, starting with our ask from our chairman of Ways and Means all the way through the process. And we will continue to do that. I have a whole bunch of statistics that I'll spare you because I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir. I think you folks sitting here this morning know the numbers probably better than most legislators as far as what's in the governor's budget and what's likely to come. But Representative Murphy gave you a good bird's eye view as to where we're at in this year. So the governor put out his budget, and that's a starting point. And now the House of Representatives is going to take up the budget in April, and then it comes to the Senate in May. We're slated to have hearings on our budget the week before Memorial Day. So you can see the time between now and the end of May are going to be very, very important. Keep close eyes on the issues that affect you. We know what they are, but we'll keep an eye on it. As you can imagine, it gets to be a frenzy when the budget season hits. And I talk money because that's what is really important right now, is that we try and get the resources that you need. And so feel free to contact me, and I know my colleagues in the House, to let us know. Keep an eye on your line items. Call us. Let us know if you want to weigh in on things that you may be hearing in your own area of service. That's all very, very important.
We need to hear from you. I think this is extremely important. I think that you should know that the Lowell delegation is always looking for more information from you, because it's extremely important that we know what matters to you. The takeaway here today for all of you is to make sure that you go back to your organizations and make sure you talk to the people that you work with, and make sure they continue to reach out, because over the next 2 to 3 to 4 months, it's going to be extremely busy, and it's going to be loud down on Beacon Hill. And quite frankly, from a legislative standpoint, we're bounced from this meeting to another meeting to another meeting to yet another meeting. And I know that I was talking to the Senator earlier, and her schedule is fairly busy today, as is mine. But the reason I'm saying that to you is because we really, truly believe in what you're doing. But we're going to get off track on our next meeting or the meeting afterwards. So if I can ask you, don't hesitate. As Senator Donahue had said, make those phone calls. Speak to the people that you work with to ensure that they call us as well.